Good morning, afternoon, and evening, people of YouTube. This is Draco Argentum welcoming you back to episode 3 of my 5-minute diatribes. Now, in our prior episodes in the series, we introduced the social justice philosophy and some of its beliefs and moralities. We introduced nerds, the personal growth that nerds experience, and the importance that nerds have developed in the eyes of our government and economy. The movie and gaming industries uncovered the untapped spending potential of the nerd, and all indications pointed towards unchecked growth. Now, that growth appealed to the social justice activists who found nerds to be compliant with their overtures. Nerds had been promised that their beloved properties would be treated and handled with care. But they found those promises to be empty and false. So here follows today's 5-minute diatribe. The social justice phenomenon in nerd culture, also known as the Lost Tribe of Woke. Part 3. Science fiction and fantasy properties operate according to certain rules. In science fiction, the fictional worlds operate very similarly to our own and follow similar rules. The only difference is that in the future, there may be new technology and new rules that they have to follow. In Farscape, they travel in space, inside of a living spaceship. It's kind of like a space whale. It's an odd take, but it still follows its own rules. In fantasy, the world may operate on drastically different rules from our own, but it still obeys its own rules. The Dresden Files follows the experience of Harry Dresden, wizard, private detective of Chicago, who really is just trying to keep up with the rent. Now, these are human stories, even though many of the characters may not be human, and it may not be in a completely human setting. Star Trek was a television show that premiered in 1966 and followed the adventures of the crew of the Starship Enterprise. The show depicted a face-sparing humanity that embraced others, regardless of race, sex, or even species. It demonstrated to the public a future that could be, while tackling other issues of the day. The long-standing rivalry between the Federation, Klingons, and Romulans served as a metaphor for the Cold War between the United States, USSR, and China. The sequel show, Star Trek Deep Space Nine, interacted heavily with the Cardassians and the Bajorans. The Cardassians were an example of a society that fell into a surveillance state, while the Bajorans were a society where the last several generations had either been slaves or members of a resistance movement that engaged in terrorist activities against the Cardassian occupation. Star Wars followed the adventures of Luke Skywalker, a farm boy from a desert planet that was pulled into an adventure beyond even his wildest imagination, with princesses, rebellions, and a magical ability called the Force. It has long since been cited as perhaps the perfect example of the hero's journey. Luke joins the rebellion, which consists of many peoples, many species, and many languages who oppose the Empire. By comparison, the evil Empire was predominantly comprised of humans, and supporting material insisted that the Empire was extremely racist against non-humans. In fact, the entire race of Wookiees had been labeled by the Empire as higher-order animals, and were enslaved to build the first Death Star. While there were not many female lead roles in the series, all of those characters were very intelligent, willful, and were considered respected leaders within the rebellion. Other leaders and heroes of the rebellion were aliens, and some were rather unpleasant to look on, and that was by design. One example of this is Admiral Akbar, who regrettably later became more widely known on the internet as a meme. By the mid-2010s, many of these properties had been dormant for a decade or better. When Disney purchased Lucasfilm and announced a new series of Star Wars movies, the fandom was jubilant. Kathleen Kennedy had the approval of George Lucas as she vowed to treat the property and characters with respect as it moved forward. With the box office success of the Kelvin Trek timeline, CBS was happy to announce a new Star Trek television show that would be updated with modern-day themes. Fans were hopefully optimistic as companies with strong social justice leanings promised good writing, relevant topics, and respect towards the story and the characters. Fan speculation was rampant about what direction their favorite properties would move in. Social media websites such as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube swelled with chatter and rumors. But many Star Wars fans were dismayed when Disney Lucasfilm announced in 2014 that the Star Wars Expanded Universe would be removed from canon and rebranded as Legends. For 30 years, the Expanded Universe had been the only supplementary material to cover the events after Return of the Jedi, and with a snap of their fingers, a la Thanos, Disney Lucasfilm turned it all into fanfiction. Now, many of these books have been looked down for bad writing, but some, such as the Thrawn trilogy, had become fan favorites. It was speculated that Disney wanted elbow room for their own Star Wars and room for new stories. Star Trek fans learned in 2015 that unlike all previous Star Trek series, the Star Trek Discovery would be a streaming service exclusive and would never see any time on CBS public television. No strangers to speculation, hopeful optimism began to sour among nerds as they waited to see how the cards would fall. And that was your 5-minute diatribe for the day. I think at this point we're about halfway to the point where I will splice these into a supercut for your ease of viewing. Now, Mrs. Argentum has informed me that I have been insensitive and lumped geeks in with the nerds. I honestly think, though, that for the purpose of these videos, I can lump them together. But I'm not woke. I may discuss the difference between the two in a future 5-minute diatribe. If I have offended, please let me know. Just remember, I'm an average nerd, and I welcome any of your questions and comments about my videos and hope to keep this conversation open. You can expect my next 5-minute diatribe tomorrow with part 4 of the social justice phenomenon in nerd culture, also known as the Lost Tribe of Woke. Please like, subscribe, hit that Twitter, and until next time, take care.